Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Cast Dice, the podcast that explores the great big wild world of tabletop games that exist today. It's been said once or twice, mainly on this podcast, that we are in the middle of a gaming renaissance. There are just too many good games that we can spend our hobby time and our hobby dollars on, and it can lead to a serious case of not knowing what to play next. And I guess that's the purpose of this podcast. It's to dig into the games that my guests and I enjoy playing, to talk about big industry events, and to talk to the people who create these games. Now, I have said this a couple times recently, but this is one of those excellent episodes that hits all three of those raison d'etre for this show. Pardon my pronunciation. We are going to talk about a game that I love playing and have not played nearly enough of recently, and I'm working on that. I've actually been painting a lot of models. We're going to talk about an industry event because it is changing the way this game is sold and the way this game is presented moving forward to make it even more accessible for all of us in the world. And we are going to talk to one of my favorite indie game designers. There is a man who's been on this show once or twice over the years, a man who has allowed me to put all of my favorite things on the tabletop, be it characters, monsters, vehicles, scenarios. Literally, the sandbox game is what we are talking about today. One of my favorite games to play and one of my favorite individuals to talk to. We are talking to Karl from Crooked Dice about 7TV. Karl, welcome back to Cast Dice.
Hello, hello, hello. How are you?
Mate, it is a pleasure. A day that I get to talk to you means we are one day closer to 7TV 80s, and I'm never going to let that go. I'm just letting you know.
Not far now. Not long to go.
Well, we knew there was a hurdle before we got to 7TV 80s, and today is that glorious, wonderful hurdle. And when I say hurdle, it's not one of those hurdles that you're going to trip and fall on if you're a gamer and like, oh, I have to painfully go through this. We are getting a really cool new way to play 7TV. It's still 7TV's second ed. Let me be clear. We are not talking a new edition of the game. However, we are going to get into what this 7TV Rulebook is all about. But before we get into that, the more recent times you've been on, we've been talking to the lovely folks at Edge Hill. We've been talking to students. We've been talking about specific, genre packs that we've been putting out for the game. But we never actually talk to you, Karl. We've talked about the history of Crooked Dice. We've talked about the history of 7TV, but you've had some big things going on in your life recently. Namely, you just came back from the UK's premier gaming convention. How was Salute?
Salute was amazing. It was back on form. There was people, there was energy. It just felt like it was kind of back to good old Salute after, 2 or 3 tough years with everything that's been going on in the world. So it was amazing. It was as ever. Everybody says this, and there were much, much worse jobs to have. But, lots of prep goes into it for all of those traders kind of getting ready because it's 2 or 3 times bigger than any of our other kind of standard wargaming shows in the UK. I think the UK Gaming Expo, which is much broader, is probably the only bigger one. But for dedicated wargamers, Salute is the one. So 130 plus traders, some amazing demo and participation games, none of which I got to see. I've like everybody else lived vicariously through Facebook afterwards going, that's amazing. I wish I'd got off the stand for 10 minutes to be able to see it. But it was great. 8,500 people I heard through the door, and it felt like it. We were super busy, and from everything I hear from other traders, they were exactly the same. So Team Crooked were amazing and stood on their feet all day. And a call out to Morgan and David as well for running a couple of the little participation games that we ran. It's a great day.
And I was going to say, it wasn't just a shop. You actually had games going as well. So what were some of the participation games that people could have played at Salute that people might have seen when they walked by?
Okay, we always kind of like to do this just to kind of give something back to kind of all of the people that kind of support us and put on a couple of quick play games. Really, it's Salute is largely a kind of a shopping event. You know, you can look and drool at those other games. So we just do quick play ones, which in theory should be about 45 minutes. But Pete and Adrian, who played first of all, I think were on there for about an hour and a half on our Lurkers from the Deep board. So I took the Lurkers from the Deep feature pack and kind of distilled it down into one 45-minute game with as many of the elements that I could fit in as possible. So we used the lovely Sarissa buildings and our range for that. And then we had a classic 7TV fantasy one that we often have in there, which is good, Escape from Nottingham Castle, with our new Robin Hood miniature range. So they were packed all day.
Oh, those new miniatures for the Robin Hood range are magnifique. I mean, you have always put out some exceptional miniatures. And I sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I am not a shill. This man does not pay me. However, I adore the work that he commissions for his company. And the fantasy stuff in particular that you've been doing recently, outrageously good. And the 80s stuff is, in my book, perfection. And we'll talk about the 80s stuff in a second. But yeah, that Robin Hood stuff is wonderful.
Yeah, as a shout out to Mark Evans, who is just wonderful. We've worked with Mark right from day one. He did The Scientists, right, 14 years ago or whatever it was. And he's just great to work with, and he just creates wonderful characters and moments with all of those. So I'm delighted with those. I wanted to do those for a long time, but my kind of wish list. It's on a roll now. It's that long.
Yes, yes, it is.
Takes a while to get to some things.
Well, before we actually start digging into Kickstarters, both past and present, because for you, it's the end of a wonderful era of the last Kickstarter ending. And because you don't run two simultaneously, you are always fastidious about, I'm not starting one until another one's done. And I respect that more than I can say in words. But let's talk about the game itself, because often when we have people on to talk about these things, we don't actually talk about the games that they play. Now, I realize I have worked in the gaming industry, and when I did not get to play and paint as much as I wish I did, or even close to as much as I do now. But when you do get to play 7TV, there are so many different genres you can play into. There are so many different casts you can run. What are some of the ones that you've been running recently, or should I say you've been wanting to run recently?
Yeah. The great shame is that Crooked keeps me quite busy, which means I don't get to play as much as I like. If anything, I'm normally kind of reffing or helping people out if they play. It's weird because the way that I plan my games either starts with being inspired by some terrain that I've seen or that I want to build, or some minis that either I've kind of got in my collection or I just want to get that weird thing on the table. So I always kind of start from there. I kind of quite like the challenge of building a game. Lurkers was a little bit like that. Even the ones that we plan out for fun of shows, that's kind of where I start and then work out, which I know is a bit backwards, but it's but that's kind of what I do. But I don't know, the games, people often joke that in all of the rule sets there's always cultists. In every single set that there's always a cultist profile, and I'm always drawn towards that slightly supernatural, horror, Lovecraftian sometimes kind of element in things. You can have, insane leaders, mad cultists, chuck a couple of good monsters in there. All the developments, what I say in all of the games is give me more monsters. When I say it's Sydney Barron that's saying that, it's not, it's me saying that every time. So yeah, those are the kind of things that I'm usually drawn to. Even when we did a Scooby-Doo style game for Salute once, I still put cultists in it because you want to. So that's what I'm normally drawn to as a cast, and that's probably reflected now. We did it with 80s and we brought it into the core rule, but we've got kind of a horror genre. for that. So that's reflected a little bit more things. But you've seen it in all of the sets one way or the other. There's a weird unknown thing or a weird menace or something. Always try to get that in.
Yeah, I got to say, during the lockdown, when I was painting up some 7TV models to play, when things eventually lifted, one of the very first things after flipping through a number of the 7TV core games, I was looking at what were some common characters that I could have across and went, Cultists. So I actually painted Cultists, which is why I was laughing. So, yeah. And I've seen people posting online that, I seem to use the same Cultist models in almost every game I play. Now, that's a choice. But there are lots of other casts you can play. But yes, the Cultists are a thing in this game.
They're quite versatile models as well. I've got some new ones coming out actually so yes, that'll there's another set. I'd probably never stop doing Cultists.
Well, cast of thousands, right? All of whom are wearing a hood of some variety and hiding. Yeah, exactly. Right on. Well, I do have to also ask, because you have put out some exceptional models recently. I may have gotten a certain 80s investigator that lives in Hawaii and drives a Ferrari recently in the mail. I may have gotten a small Asian sidekick model with a baseball bat who helps free the children from the mine under the thuggy rule.
Doom's Temple, let's call it.
Yes, Doomsday. There you go. I may have just finished painting a certain super spy and a giant metal-toothed henchman and a megalomaniac who wants to send rockets into space and live in a space station as he destroys the world. There are many wonderful models that you've either put out recently or I've painted recently. And it does make me wonder, what are some of your favorites that you've been putting out either recently or in general? I know the Cultists, I get that. But playing's one thing and seeing a beautiful model is another. Do you have any that run out and grab you? My personal recent fave that I've painted of yours was a futuristic robotic police officer with a very large gun.
Yeah. That's good. Okay, so my favorite miniature that we've got is the most recent one that pops into my mailbox that I get out, and then my next favorite one is the next one that pops into my that's kind of how it works. Oh, I love that. I've got to do another one. There are lots. I mean, just on that, the military robot that would go with that robotic is amazing. That's James Sheriff, and that's all hand sculpted. I mean, there's a few people that I thought that's a kind of a digital sculpt, but no, he is Mr. Robot. He's James, and he's amazing. That's great. For me, it'll be pose sometimes. When we're kind of commissioning people, I'll say to this, can we try and get that weight in the shoulders and in the knees so that you can see that dynamism and that movement in it? I want someone to look at it and know exactly what that moment is that we've captured and what the next movement is going to be. Kev White does that beautifully.
Oh yeah, he does.
Mark Evans, who worked with it, does that fantastically. Ernst is amazing at kind of all things. But I don't know. And we've got such a range of different kind of sculptors as well. Hopefully they look like they're all in the same wheelhouse, but there's different styles in there that I like. Ian Colwell, that we've worked with on all of the Lurkers from the Deep range, the fish folk in there. Honestly, I think I've said this before, I could just do all of those fish folk all of the day, all of the time, and I'd be quite happy to do that as a range, because they're just wonderful. It's character and movement. Some of the very early things in the Timeless Security that Ian Mountain did for running forward with a gun, and it's just wonderful and wonderfully dynamic. So anything that captures those is going to be my next favorite, really.
Yeah, I've actually bought a bunch of those to use for my GI Joe project, and I've used some of those and then puttied over the top and added gear to match the characters from the series, because as you say, they do have that wonderful sense of movement, and it really does add variety to the force. So I do recommend, folks, if you are looking for a model that you might have to do a little converting, there's some great crooked poses that you can just do a little tweak at. That metal tooth Bond villain that I was talking about earlier, the fact that he's sort of coming over the top with both hands raised and he's such a monstrous model, just to literally put him next to my super spy, I actually start getting worried. I'm like, oh no. Anyway,
I remember when we did that, when we went, I'm sorry.
Message for you, sir.
That's for doing that. That's Eric Idle in my email, and I really should have turned that off before we started. That particular henchman, is he too big? He's too big, isn't he? Compared
he
to
is.
And then we looked at some inspirational photograph and went, no, he ain't. He's
perfect.
He really is that big. Wow. That's a great. Again, that's Ernst, and working as, but we're fairly confident now with the tolerances on those things. But outstretched fingers. It's not always the friend of the caster, but we've managed to kind of we've learned a lot over the last kind of 14 years, and we can kind of get that working for us now to do what we want. So yeah.
Right on. Well, let's get into it, shall we? Because I know I'm gonna get in trouble if I don't start actually talking about why we are here today, which is 7TV, the core rulebook. Now you might say, Brad, this game's been out for a while. It has. We're well into a second edition. However, what's happened previously, where there were not edition boxes. Karl, I'll let you explain this because you'll explain the genre better than I do.
Yeah, I mean, it's been 8 years and 4 box sets since we released the original 7TV, which was Inch High Spy-Fi, and that was just taking our first edition and just updating that and kind of fleshing it out with all the accessories and things that you needed. And honestly, when we started that, we didn't think we'd be doing 4 boxes in 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to the point with the way the world has been in the last 2 or 3 years, with kind of rising costs, that the cost of those boxes has jumped quite considerably each time we've kind of produced it. Yeah. It's getting to the point where we couldn't keep the older versions in print and continue to kind of produce new ones because of the cost. So there was a practical consideration was, well, people keep asking me, when can I get Apocalypse again? And I'm kind of putting them on. I'm holding them, kind of going, well, we'll try and get back to it when we can. Also, with those 4 box sets, people were kind of asking us, so what do I need to play? And we always say, well, it depends on the type of game that you want. If you want a kind of action adventure 60s, 70s thing, then Inch High Spy-Fi is great. Mad Max will give you Apocalypse. Fantasy is pretty self-explanatory, and pulp. It depends what you want to game. But it was clearly starting to fragment a little bit, with people getting a little bit confused. So between that and when I think the real crunch was when we did 7TV Dracula, we wrote that for fantasy and then sold out of the box, and it was like, oh no, we've got something coming up and we can't support it with something. So I kind of pivoted slightly and said, okay, with this, we'll do a dedicated small rule book, and for it, which just distills all the stuff you need for Dracula just to be able to play that. And in doing that and kind of laying that out, it was like, actually, this really kind of works as a manual, which essentially is all those rule books are. It was quite a good format. So I kind of made a decision, okay, what we need to do is just consolidate everything that we've got there into one place. We can keep that in print as the core. People can then buy the individual, what we're going to call genre pack slightly underneath it for the theme that they want. And we can, this was the other key thing, we could kind of keep the price point around where we are, rather than you buying a box every time. The core rules being repeated in that seemed slightly unfair. When you're buying content, if you're a core 7TV gamer, you're repeating a lot of that stuff each time. That didn't really seem like cricket. So buy one book to rule them all, and one set of kind of templates in there, and then buy the other bits at kind of lower price points later on. So there were a lot of factors that kind of poured into making the kind of decision to move over to it, particularly with the change between first edition to second edition, from a book to, we were kind of rolling back slightly. But I think from a business point of view, from a customer point of view, and from a kind of mechanical point of view, because we learned quite a lot since we did Inch Ice Bi-Fi. We've added extra things in. We've clarified a few bits and pieces. Other supplements and stuff have got rules which we think you could include those. They're quite good, but they're not. So we've wrapped all of that up and consolidated all of those things into hopefully a kind of a definitive, what we're calling a revised edition, because I really don't want to give the impression that it's kind of a third edition. But there's some new stuff in there for the kind of the more veteran player, if you want to, so that, as we've always said with 7TV, it's a bit like Lego. You can keep building and adding stuff to it depending on, you know, the complexity of the games that you want. So yeah, that's kind of where we ended up. But hopefully it's something that's going to be useful for kind of older players. A lot of people have said, "Oh, it'd be really good if we could just have this in one place, you know, to start off with," but also be hopefully a nice jumping on point for new people who said, "Oh, I've been meaning to get into this, but I don't know what to get." With that in mind, and with the core rule book, we've kind of expanded things out. So there are now 6 quite cinematic genres, which are broader than just the more themed stuff that you used to get in one of the box sets. You know, we do themed pulp genres, but now we've got action, adventure, fantasy, historical, horror, and sci-fi. So that's quite broad. We've gone for kind of the real kind of meta categories that you would probably see as you were walking through an old video shop. You know,
exactly
for those of us of a certain age.
Hey, don't go shaming me. I remember Blockbuster Video.
Oh, no,
I do want to call out a couple of things you said there, because there's a lot of really important information that you just laid out as to why this book is there. And there's a couple of points I want to draw an underline under. You said it was a little book. This is over 250 pages, Karl. This is not a little book. It is a significant tome. But what's really clever is, from having spoken to you off air and having seen a couple of things, I'm going to let a little cat out of the bag here, in that when you got the boxes in the past, they came with stacks of cards that you would play. You would have, you know, depending on which genre box, of course, you have the countdown deck that basically plays out how long you have for the game. And it, you know, each time you flip it, something interesting happens on the tabletop. And we'll talk about more of that in a second. What you've done here, because this is a standalone book and you're sending it without cards, yes, you can get the cards. That's one of the add-ons. But you've done it so that even if you just have a standard deck of cards, you can play using this book without having to buy anything else. You've also included a lot of the character profiles so that they're really easy to pick up. You can photocopy them out of the back. If you have the book and you don't have anything else and you want to have those character cards on the tabletop, bang, it's all there in the book. The book is really well put together and is standalone without needing to buy all the extra things. Now, don't get me wrong. I own all 4 7TV boxes, and I love to have all the character cards. It's like a Pokemon, the world's worst Pokemon game. I have to have them all. I have the creature deck. I have all of the cards I can get my grubby paws on, and I love it. But you don't need those, because this particular edition, as you said, is a great place to jump in if you are starting with 7TV. Or because as you said before, a lot of the 7TV boxes had something new and interesting in each one. They brought something rules-wise, something different and fresh each time. You innovate every time you put out one of these boxes. Otherwise, it would just be the same thing with a different pretty cover. This book sort of brings it all together in a way that is really pleasing. And for those of us who have all of your boxes, it really makes it easy to go, oh yes, it's all here. And if I want to dig in, I can go in these directions with genre boxes, for example. But this book really does bring it all together. So thank you. Now, one of the things that I get asked all the time is, what is 7TV? because people hear the name and they go, that's a tabletop game. And I know we've said it on this show about 1,000 times, but we're going to say it again because it is one of those games that when I explain it to people, you often get the, wait, what? Oh, yeah, that's cool. What? That's usually the pitch for this game.
Yeah.
This game allows you to recreate your favorite cinematic scenes on the tabletop. It turns any miniature you have or any genre or any intellectual property or any movie or any TV show or any comic book or any idea. It allows you to pull it in and put it on the tabletop and act out an episode of a circa 1970s, 80s, 90s, whatever TV show or movie on the tabletop. So you can have anything happening. It is the ultimate sandbox game is what I've called it in the past, because you can bring anything to play in the sandbox. You can literally pull all the toys out of your toy box and put it on the table and have a good time with it. But it isn't just a miniature agnostic game because you're playing out an episode of a TV show. And so the structure of that is how the game functions. There's a first act, a second act, and a third act. And it really does make for an interesting and different gaming experience. For those who haven't tried it, it is, I think, my favorite skirmish game by a country mile. And it has so many interesting and different rules in the way that it's laid out that it is super clever. Karl, I know I've thrown a lot out there. Can you maybe more succinctly say what is 7TV and why should people look at it?
Okay. It's a fast, fun, cinematic skirmish game is how we try to sum it out. 6 to 8 models, very quick for you to build your sides, and a huge range, and probably this is the key thing, of archetypes. So you could have, we've now got a secret spy. So your secret spy could be, you may love James Bond or Austin Powers or Jason Bourne or whatever it might be. You decide what that archetype is to post on the kind of the tone of the game that you would like to do, or the miniature that you might have available, or your favorite scene or movie series or whatever it might be. It allows you to do that because of the breadth of what we've got. But it's essentially a small scale skirmish game filtered through the lens of kind of cinematic tropes and things. So we've taken a lot of the kind of familiar terms that you've got, like rather than heroes, champions, and troops, you've got stars, co-stars, and extras. The turn sequence, depending on the game you're playing, we use as now script cards is the standard that we're using for in the core rulebook. You're able to use prop cards, which are one-off kind of buff. You might call them magic items in another game or something like that you can use as well. When your cast is, or it has to test to be defeated, they're axed. They're not killed. You know, in the good way of all of those TV shows, no one dies. They just get blown up and fly over and land in a pile of boxes. So we take all of those kind of cinematic tropes that hopefully people kind of enjoy, and try to feed them into the game. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It's intentionally kind of written like that. So there's lots of in-jokes and Easter eggs in there for the film buff, if you want to find them. Some of them are just for about 3 people of my very close friends that have that know that particular gag. I'm terrible for that. But there's lots of those on there. But the system itself is fun. It's a traditional you go I go system, but there's some nice little extra tactical things that you can do with the use of, again, another cinematic term, plot points, which your cast, that's your squad of models, generate each turn, and that gives you tactical options about whether you activate your models, whether you use those plot points to improve your chances of hitting your opponent or defending against your opponent, or powering some of the extra things like those prop cards that I talked about earlier, gadgets or magic items, whatever they might be, props, or some of the abilities that that particular profile might have, which are called special effects. There's those plot points are the lifeblood of the game. And you have a lot of options that you can do rather than just your kind of more traditional kind of just two actions, move, shoot, move, whatever it might be as well. There's a little bit more going on, which I think makes things a little different in 7TV.
Yeah, that's right. And you have, as you said, you have your cast is led by a star. You could have a heroic star. You could have a villainous star. You could have a neutral. Can you have a neutral star?
We don't have neutral stars in there, but we've done them in the past. There's no reason why you can't. Yeah.
And each one of those will fit into one of the genres that Karl was talking about earlier. Of course, those genres are, Karl?
The genres that we've got for the Karl Rulebook are action. So that is kind of martial arts movies and cop movies, that kind of thing. Then we've got adventure, which is our more kind of pulpy, swashbuckling kind of side of things. Fantasy, pretty self-explanatory. Historical, so if you want to do Robin Hood or King Arthur or whatever it might be, or a kind of war movie epics, you can kind of do that thing. Horror, which has kind of, again, been in most of the other sets, but if you want to do kind of slasher movies or that kind of cabin in the woods, that kind of thing. And then
you could also do Scooby-Doo for that. I mean, you mentioned that earlier. That's horror as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I mean, we're broad with how we kind of use those, and we encourage people to kind of stretch that as much as they want to. And then the final one is sci-fi. Again, that all of these are quite broad churches. That's the point. And particularly with the Karl Rulebook, we wanted to make them span, the breadth of largely action cinema. There's not romance films in there and that kind of thing because there's not as many guns in when Harry met Sally. To be fair, I've noticed, so it doesn't work quite as well. We're for your action adventure kind of thing. There's a broad set that you can pick from. So.
But you do mention guns, and of course the martial arts and the fighting as a traditional miniature war game. It's in the title. You're often going to get that action element. But one of the things I really like about 7TV is it goes beyond that. If, for example, we think of the Daring Rebel, her heroic co-star, she has two abilities just on the front of her card, not even including all of the different things on the back of her card that she can spend plot points or the abilities she has. Just two of her quote unquote attacks aren't actual attacks at all. One is a stall for time, which does no damage if you can pull it off, but immobilizes the person that she's talking to, or intense negotiations, which again does no damage and distracts somebody, which has an effect in the game. So there is a lot of strategy to this game. I know, for example, I was playing a game of this with our good friend Dave Monroe. I was bringing my visitors from a certain TV show from the 80s. Aliens in red, suits, jackboots, trying to take over the world, pull off the faces and having lizards underneath, that kind of thing. And he was playing resistance fighters. And I was cleaning his clock until he happened to read one of the rules on my card, which says that he could spend a plot point to have one of my characters backstab. And one of my characters was standing next to the guy that he was trying to assassinate. And apparently there was a fifth columnist who just pulled out his pistol,
always
took care of the guy next to him, and Dave won the game. And I felt like a fool for putting my guy with a gun next to the objective. But these things happen at 7TV.
The star
it was wonderful. It was a great game. We had a blast.
We found over the last 40 minutes, the game swings backwards and forwards between each person's turn. And more often than not, it comes down to that final climactic last couple of turns. And it could go either way at that point. And that's the kind of game that I like to play, where you both feel like you've got a good winning chance. Now, occasionally someone will bring a knife to a gunfight, and we'll get wiped out. But the game itself is kind of structured to do that with the way that the kind of turn sequence works as well, and those star qualities and special effects. We've got things that sometimes only happen in certain acts, for example. to limit it. So there's a huge amount of time that goes into kind of getting those special effects right and making sure that the kind of the naming of them as well has kind of got a little kind of cinematic nod and wink to something as well, as much as what kind of the outcome of the actual effect is, just to try and get all of that tone as much as we can into what is a kind of just a kind of core skirmish game. So we spend quite a bit of time trying to get that right.
Well, one of the examples, and I know we talked about it, I'm going to say it again because you brought it up. Scooby-Doo is one of my favorite examples for this game when talking about different casts to put down, because I have the models and I can't wait to put them on the tabletop to play this. But they don't have combat abilities. You know, no. Fred isn't toting an M16. Shaggy isn't having a shotgun. You know, Thelma doesn't have a chainsaw. That isn't how this works. They have abilities to solve crimes and to figure out, to find clues on the tabletop. And they're just as viable to win a game, even if they're fighting against, you know, the bad guys from Mad Max in a particular scenario.
Yeah, we've tried to balance things out. So it's not the person with the biggest gun. It's not the kind of games that I like. It may be something about kind of growing up with British TV where, you know, there just weren't ranged weapons basically. And there, you know, we clamored after a war movie or an exciting US show where they're all shooting at one another, but we didn't have it. So, and it's not the kind of game that I've ever really played. You know, it's that's not what I'm in it for. So, yeah, we've tried to build that in something that is now going to be standard across the forthcoming genre sets and some of the older ones. Is the presence attack. It's something that we introduced in fantasy. It's on the card, the agent card in front of you now, the flash the badge one. That little symbol means it's a presence attack. And that means that a lot of those models that don't have kind of standard ranged attacks, so they just don't have, you know, a handgun or something like that, they can still do some ranged damage. It was kind of essential for fantasy because there just weren't as many of them. You know, it was a much more melee based game. But actually it's something that people really enjoyed. We could get more tone in, but also it helped kind of balance forces off. Now, not everybody's got them. We only kind of do it where we think it's appropriate to the model, but it's they're quite fun. And we built in the background more mechanics, like more statuses, like the captured, weakened that you've got on there, and the immobilized and the distracted. And there's a couple of new ones that we've introduced in the core rulebook. Scared is a new one that we brought in because that's going to be universally kind of useful for everything. So you may recognize some of them in slightly different forms from some of the other either genre packs or boxes. But as I say, with this one, we kind of wanted to filter it and make it a definitive thing. So we've now got 10 statuses, and that should cover us for everything now. Which means when we come to do a genre patch, I don't think we'll really need to be introducing anymore. I think we've covered the lot now.
Now, I did mention we have stars. I did mention we have
yes.
co-stars, but I didn't mention the other two because there's 4 big character types in this game. We obviously those 2. Then we have the extras, who are, you know, the bodies that you often fill up a crew with. But there's a lot of different types of extras. Of course, we have heroic, we have villainous extras, but we also have things that are called neutral extras that could go either way. And, you know, they generally are a little less heroic or a little grayer in between the two. And again, it really does add flavor to the cast that you put on the tabletop, and of course, vehicles. And I know there's big gribblies in the game, big monsters of different varieties that depending on the genre you're playing or the scenario. I know sometimes those fall under stars, co-stars, or vehicles, but yes. Now, Karl, you did mention plot points before. Now, at the start of each turn, players add up the characters that they have. Their star gives them a certain number of plot points. Their co-star gives them a couple plot points or gives them less plot points. And then if you add up the extras, every 2 extra gives you a plot point. So you end up having this pool. So 7TV is very much a resource management game because, yes, you can use those to activate the characters because plot points can do that. They can also make your die rolls better. So if you desperately need to survive an attack, you can throw plot points in to roll extra dice. And that will improve your chances of succeeding. Some special effects on the backs of cards or props that people have, gadgets, depending on how you're going to look at it, they're fueled by plot points. So you'll need plot points to run those. Or if the status is that Karl was talking about a second ago, if you want to get scared off your model, you have to spend plot points. So you can boost your dice in attack. You can boost your dice in defense. Plot points are huge. And if you don't have any, it feels really bad. So one must really manage that as part of this game. And that's where so many of the tactics in this game come in. It's not quite a game of bad decisions that I've called a couple of other games I've played. Although sometimes it feels like every decision you make towards the end of the turn when you're running low on plot points and you're trying to save a few for when your opponent goes, you're just going, oh no, why don't I have more? Yeah. Karl, am I getting this right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And also, it's a diminishing return. The number that you generate are the number of active models that you've got in your cast. So as your opponent starts to whittle down your forces, you're generating less each turn. So it ratchets up the tension, and it just makes the whole game are just a little bit more exciting. It just gives you a few more tactical options about what you want to do, rather than just, my friend Morgan has said this for years. If you can't do so, it's the dullest thing in a game. If your model just can't do anything. You think you've spent all that time painting and putting them together. It's not fun. And fun is a word that I'd say to all of the developers and things when we're writing in there. It's a key thing. If it ain't fun, it ain't going in. It might work mechanically, but it's we've got to think of what the kind of player experience is, and there's nothing like being stymied because the rules don't let you, rather than a decision that you've made. So we've always tried to take that as an ethos when we've been kind of developing various aspects of it.
Definitely. And as we said before, Karl, you're going to have to help me. I have like 6 words for the same cards because it's changed over the years. The countdown deck.
Yes. Okay. So the when we did Inch High Spy-Fi, it started off the countdown deck, and we've used that a couple of times. When we did Pulp, we couldn't help ourselves but change the name of it to Cliffhanger, because Cliffhanger is perfect for it. And then when we did it with Fantasy, we thought, well, Countdown and Cliffhanger don't really work for fantasy stuff, so we adopted a trilogy deck. Why I've tried to make a lot of things consistent in the rule book. So in the core rule book, they're going to be called a script deck. That will be the kind of universal meta. And the same is a similar thing with gadgets and magic items. We've made those props because I kind of thought, why didn't I call them that first time round? It's one of those annoying things. That's the best word for that. However, when it comes to that countdown deck, I'm going to use the tone kind of trumps and tropes trump kind of consistency. So within each of the genre boxes that we put out, they'll probably still be called Countdown, Cliffhanger, Trilogy, because it works for that. And within your little dedicated set, I think that's fine. But for the core bit, if you're not interested in buying those, script cards is what they're going to be called now. And that's Act 1, Act 2, and Finale. That's all exactly the same.
And all of those, when you start flipping those cards, again, once you run out of Act 1, once you run out of Act 2, once you run out of Act 3, they run through. And then once Act 3 is done, the game's done. So there aren't a set number of turns in this game because you set the number of cards depending on how big the board you're playing on is. That's right. Not how many models, how big the board is, which is a very clever little mechanic. But it also ties in because you can burn these. You can, if you have all of the objectives, but your opponent's coming up and is going to get them from you, you can be like, oh, okay, I'm going to burn 2 of these. And it means your opponent actually gets bonus plot points. So you're giving them something, but you're also shortening the game in the process. And there's enough of these that, again, it's that give and take. oh, are they going to get it back? Will I have time to get it back from them if they take it from me? And it's, again, those bad decisions, those tactical choices that you need to have to make that makes the game so great. But each one of those, when they flip, has an effect on the tabletop. And there's a lot of different fun, interesting movie, TV reference, genre reference occurrences that can happen. My favorite, of course, is like a set malfunction where a piece of terrain on the table moves or, blows up, or, something happens where something is undone on the tabletop because there was a script rewrite. There's all sorts of really fun events that happen on the tabletop that, again, just ratchets up the feel of this being an actual episode being filmed. It's good stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, we put all of those as the standard kind of script deck in that core rulebook, which will work for any of the games, even if you buy one of the other kind of genre packs, is that they are they're very much themed to the production of a show, just to kind of continue to get that kind of theme in there. So yes, as you say, set malfunction or diva or power cut or whatever they might be. There you go.
Now, we've mentioned the genre packs. Now, the genres in the game are not the same as the ones that will be coming out as separate packs later. As I've mentioned ad nauseum, and will continue to mention, I cannot wait for 7TV 80s, which is in and of itself its own genre pack. So everything in that box will be themed to the 80s, and it will be a VHS size box that will have expansions, like a different countdown deck, for example, script deck that you can use for 80s themed games that apply to 80s in particular. There'll be 80s scenarios, there'll be 80s MacGuffins, which are special kind of objectives you can achieve on the tabletop. There's just all sorts of 80s associated things that will appear with that. There's Inch High Spy-Fi will be coming back as its own genre pack for those of you who like, as you said before, the James Bond movies or the Jason Bourne movies. We have the Apocalypse genre pack, the Fantasy, the Pulp. The old boxes are coming back as genre packs. You can use the rules and the cards out of the main rule book. You can use the scenarios out of the main rule book. And there are specific scenarios and occurrences that happen on the tabletop for each of the genres that are in the rule book, which I think is a really nice touch. It isn't just one generic set of scenarios. It really does cater out to the type of game you're playing. But these genre packs take that to the next level. Is that right, Karl?
That's absolutely right. Yeah, the core rule book, as I say, is those broad meta cinematic categories that you would get. So imagine walking through your video store. Oh, I want to play sci-fi. Oh, I want to watch a sci-fi movie. You go there. Then you look at all of the different types of sci-fi movie. Whether that be your space opera, or your space horror, or your invasion movie, or whatever it might be. So each of these genre packs that we've got does a much deeper dive into a particular era or subject or genre, and you'll see much more kind of familiar archetypes and tropes and things used in each one, and each is a little different because each of those eras or genres is a little different. So we may approach some mechanics slightly differently, just because that suits the genre. So you can really kind of really feel like you're playing that, an old cliffhanger serial or an old 60s or 70s TV show. So yeah.
You mean 80s TV show? Because once you give me that box, you'll be prying out of my cold dead hands. I'll be playing Inch High Spy-Fi 80s version. I'll be playing Apocalypse in the 80s. I'm never giving it up, Karl. Anyway, sorry.
There's lots and lots of good stuff in there. That's all written and done. So my original plan was to put that first genre pack in with the core rulebook, but actually it slightly muddied the waters. I think it's better to establish what the core rulebook is and then follow up with that. And for all of those people waiting for it, I think that will probably be sort of late summer. I'm gonna say maybe September, October when we bring that out to Kickstarter at the latest. and there is a ton of new miniatures for that as well. So yeah, that'll be a good one. And Helena, who has written a large portion of this, will be pleased because she's been waiting forever for me to bring it out as well. So.
Well, Karl, I have to say that you've been leaking 80s models left, right, and center in the new release section of your store in anticipation for this. And so, for example, I was painting my RoboCop the other day. I've been painting things just to match everything up so that when this drops, I have casts ready to go. Because how sad would it be if I had a toy chest full of Crooked Dice 80s models and not one of them was painted before this happened? I had that horrible moment in the shower the other day and went, I have got to fix this now.
There's plenty of choice there. So,
well, let's talk about feature packs, because feature packs aren't new. We have had many of these in the past. In fact, I was literally pulling apart my not Flash Gordon one last night and looking at my Ming the Merciless cast, trying to figure out what I could put in there to be ready to play some pulp games, because I do have quite a few pulp villains, and I was thinking a villain on villain game in Egyptian Temple would be a lot of fun, possibly with a crash spaceship and Ming involved. I don't know. These are just some ideas I'm having. Feature packs are sort of adventures in and of themselves that take place in that genre. Am I getting that right?
Essentially, it's a scenario pack. If you kind of in old RPG terms, it's a themed adventure with themed characters and a themed story between 3 and 5 episodes. So it's a campaign. We may do ones in the future which are a bit more kind of anthology based, but the ones that we've produced so far chart heroes or villains, because you can play as either, and your success at the end of a particular episode may give you buffs, bonuses for the next one, and give to the overall. So at the end of those 5 games, you'll be able to say there's an overall kind of winner of that. So we've done 4 or 5 of those already. We've got a lot more that have been waiting in the wings. Once I made the decision to kind of move to the core rulebook, we went, actually, obviously we're going to need to then streamline some of these to fit in with that. So there's quite a few of them that are circling and ready to go. So
now, I've heard you mention some of these in the past, but some of these are new and exciting. We're talking about the Kings of Kung Fu City, Martial Arts 7TV. Hello. Manta Ray 5, which reminds me of those awesome vehicle puppet TV shows on different.
From there. Yeah, yep. Wait until you see our Piranha Craft sculpt. It's very exciting.
Oh, loving this. We have Zombie Drill Eaters. Okay. Valley of Dread, which is a fantasy pack. And we have the Secrets of Gold City, which looks like a black and white adventure movie from the early days of Hollywood. You want to talk to us a little bit about some of these, because they all look amazing. And I'm sure they're all going to have their own miniatures that come out with them.
Pretty much. Valley of Dread's already out. That was one of our older ones in there, mainly because I haven't got artwork. But we've got a couple of other fantasy ones that are in the workers as well, which we've based around some of the miniature lines. Kings of Kung Fu City. I wrote this, oh god, years ago, and it's my kind of ode to those beat 'em up, side-scrolling, button mashing kind of things as well. I was lucky enough to purchase a lot of the Golgo Island miniatures, which has got a large range of kind of suitable miniatures for this. So that'll be a kind of a beat 'em up one with some slightly different mechanics to allow you to to do power ups and special moves and that kind of thing. So that should be quite a lot of fun. And we've got a nice kind of new range of side moving kind of henchmen and fighters for that. So that will be for 80s. That's 80s has got a genre called Silicon Dream, where we start to touch around the edges of a lot of arcade favorites as well. We it is movies, it is TV shows, but essentially it's popular culture stuff. So we've tapped into that a little bit for 80s. So that does that. Manta Ray 5, Manta are an organization that protects the world's oceans from the evil Emperor Poseidon, if I've got the names right, which was written by Glenn Allen. And we've got a load of minis and some vehicles for that. That's a nice little kind of 3-chapter thing. And we've got some floor plans and various bits and pieces that will work with that. That's probably going to be an Inch High Spy-Fi one because it seems the best fit. Zombie Drill Eaters is from first edition Zombie TV, which is it's a mix of kind of Cannibal Holocaust and Driller Killer, and it just seems the wonderful selection of 3 words. But it's basically it's a zombie one, which we've never really done for Apocalypse. You know, all those profiles were there, but we've never done that. So that's written and done as well. And Secrets of Golden City is written by Dr. Peter Wright from Edge Hill, and we've been working on that for a while. When we were trying to figure out the kind of format of what a feature pack might be, it started off as because it was pulp as well, kind of like 12 episodes, like a cliffhanger, like a traditional serial will be. But we went, oh no, that's way too much, and we've crunched, and we've got that down. But that's an expedition into Shangri-La. And whatever our heroes discover there, and we've also got Return to the Mountains of Madness as well, which we're outlining as well. So just wait for some albino penguins, which are already sculpted, and some explorers, things like that. So there's lots. This is just a small kind of snapshot of what we've got, but there's easily 10, maybe more than that are going on in the background. So we wrote these to start off with. People, it's a sandbox game as we've said, but if you're time poor and you just want to go, no, tell me what to do. I want to play that game, or I like that particular thing. Pick one of these up, and it's kind of plug and play, really.
But it also gives you some really cool, as you say, right out of the bag casts that you can play generic 7TV with, and you know. And it can give you some cool extra miniatures to put on the tabletop, as in objectives and MacGuffins that will suit the cast that you are trying to play on the tabletop. As I was saying earlier with my Ming cast, I was like, wow, I have all of it, everything I need right here to do something really cool. Even an STL for a crashed, rocket ship that is perfect for what I need for this.
When these are written, they at the core of kind of 7TV really is when you're building a cast, you build it with ratings. That's it's the point system basically, and there's no reason why you couldn't pick up one of these feature packs, play one of the episodes kind of scenarios in there. As long as you've got the same kind of ratings as it suggests, you could field any models in there. Have a quick read of it to make sure that there aren't any profilers in there that somehow are affected by special rules, but that's not beyond the ken of any wargamer to adapt. They have got a cast written for you if that's what you want to play and you like narrative play more than kind of open play, but they should work for anything. So that's the idea. We don't care what you play, just play, really.
I'm suddenly feeling like I need to play the Thundercats versus Dracula. I don't know why. Just maybe those are miniatures I have. I don't know why. Let's talk about some of the Kickstarter exclusive miniatures, because one of the things that when you guys put out Kickstarters, one of my favorite things are the new and exciting miniatures. Now, you guys have been, as I said, just leaking new models like a sieve every month in your new releases. So I was like, what's going to be left? And I was wondering what you were going to put out with the book, because the book isn't themed, because the book is generic, because you are going to be putting out tons of models and miniatures with the genre packs and the features packs coming out. So what's with the basic? And what we're getting with some of the stretch goals are some very clever TV themed or movie genre theme miniatures, which I think is a nice nod and a wink that you wouldn't necessarily buy otherwise. But now that I've seen these, I'm like, hell yeah, I want these. I don't know how I'm going to use them, but I'm sure I'm going to use them.
It's you're absolutely right. This is not this is a rules-based Kickstarter. Rather, when a lot of our other ones are obviously much more miniature heavy, but we know that people like the miniatures, so we've done a couple of things. I've been wanting to do a production team forever. We've been talking about it, 10 years or something ridiculous. And we had one older cameraman with a big rostrum kind of camera. And we've got a new cameraman for this, which isn't will be painted by the time we go live. But these just seemed like a nice kind of meta set that we could do to add in if people want to add these to their pledges. I will say the famous director that we've got there will be it'll be free to anybody that backs in the first 24 hours over a kind of a certain pledge level.
Right.
So that's a 24-hour kind of early bird one, and everybody will get that, and then the other ones you can add on if you like them. But the cameraman's really quite cute that we've got. So and as well as that, we've then given kind of either new players or even some veterans who want to pick up some things, some discounted kind of sets to get them started, themed to our new meta genres. There you go. Adventure and fantasy in there, and I've tried to theme it so that you've got a kind of potential start and co-start and a couple of extras, and that's really just playing to the whole kind of ethos of 7TV is that you can play what you want. You've got lots and lots of different extra types that you might be able to put in, and we still want you to theme the cast the way that you want to. So there's 4 heroes, 4 villains, pretty much in most of those sets that you can pick out. Some of which, there's a super spy archetype, a profile card that you got, and a mastermind one that you might got. But your co-stars are really kind of quite flexible, so you could have those as whatever you want. We're not prescriptive about that. But yeah, action, horror, and a few other ones. 6 in total.
Well, with these, almost all of them have your star, your co-star, both your heroic and your villainous, and then you have a couple of extras.
Yeah.
And what that means is that right off the bat, you, depending on the point value of each model, we're talking, because a star is typically 10, co-stars are typically 5, and extras are, 1 to 3. We're usually talking about 17, 18 points out of 20 to 40 that you would have in your cast on each side to start with. That's a hell of a good place to start, especially since you're getting the discount. And then all you need to do is add another couple of, characters to taste extra wise, or a vehicle. And as we say in Australia, Bob's your uncle. You're ready to go on the tabletop. And, these are a great way to get into 7TV or a new genre if you're looking into that. So yeah, it's great.
And again, it was just trying to get the kind of price point right for people as well, so it doesn't feel like it's a massive investment, but they can get going fairly quickly, I would hope, with these. So.
Exactly. Well, let's talk about some of the unlocks, because whenever there's a Kickstarter, people want to talk about the unlocks. Now, when we've talked about some of the Kickstarters you've done in the past with all the miniatures and all these other, there's been sort of epic stretch goals, but with this, because it's the book and it's everything is an add-on to the book. So obviously $15,000 is the basic start, and that's just, it's funded. Well, we're off to the races. We have a book. And then from there, we have things like the PDF, the camera operator, we have a bookmark ribbon, we have the floor manager, the status ring STLs, which I cannot wait for, printed script deck, which are the countdown cards I was talking about earlier, printed genre cards, awesome, boom operator, we have profile card tuck box to keep things safe, which I happen to be a big fan of. Oh, yes. I had to make my own for all of the ones I already have, and I would love to have some of these boxes. We have deluxe plot point markers for the tabletop and special dice STLs. So again, though, the real focus of this isn't, extravagant new unlocked miniatures so much as it is getting the rule book out so people can play this amazing game.
Yes, our previous Kickstarters were at a much lower kind of funding point, but with this, I really want to kind of make sure that it needs to be a little bit higher just to cover that kind of print cost. It's a 288 page kind of hardback, so it's a little bit of a bigger kind of funding goal that we've got after. But yeah, a little mix of kind of miniatures and then upgrades to it. We've got a few other little things that I'm kind of holding back. I've said this to you before. I never know how well these things are going to go. You know, we've got a bit of a track record. This will be our 13th Kickstarter, I think. But I'm never entirely sure how quickly it's whether we're going to get there or not. So we're trying to give a mix of free things and upgrades to the book, which everybody will get, and then a few minis, and hopefully after that it'll be quite achievable, kind of smaller stretches that we've got. So hopefully a bit of something for everyone. And what we've tried to do is say, okay, so the things that we've said are kind of all freebies and included in books, but if you want a deluxe set of these things like the script deck or the genre cards, we're just making additional accessories available to you, just to speed play. But they were kind of a nice to have rather than an essential thing. I don't want to feel like we're cutting people out of how they can play with it by putting things that they have to have. That doesn't seem the right way to do it. So
yeah, exactly. Now, Karl, if you'll indulge me for a second, I did mention earlier, friends, let me pull back the curtain a little bit. This is Brad, not show. This is just the guy, the gamer, the guy who plays games like you. I get accused often on this show of being some sort of shill who has people on to talk about things and he's always saying good things. Yes, there's enough negativity on the internet. I literally do this show because I like to talk about the things that interest me. It's a side effect of my being an adult with attention deficit disorder. I don't make that as a joke. I do have attention deficit disorder. You might get that from my enthusiasm. Where I'm going with this, though, is if somebody's on the show, it's often, well, not often, it is that I'm a fan of the things that they do. I am not a fan of Kickstarters in general. Because I think they're often misused by game companies. They often promise too much. They don't deliver they don't always deliver on time. They don't always deliver the quality. However, I have backed, I think, 3 of Karl's Kickstarters now. They have always come exactly as I expect, in the time frame I expect, and they are always better than I actually hoped they would be. I say that as someone who notoriously avoids Kickstarters. I respect the hell out of Karl in that he will not start another Kickstarter until he's delivered on the promises of the previous. To me, that says a lot. Now, I'm embarrassing Karl to no end by doing this, but Crooked Dice is an independent game company. Karl talks about Crooked being this, that, and the other thing, and it is, but it is a very small company, and he spends a lot of time working on it. He is not a leader of a faceless, massive minions. There's a star and a couple co-stars on this particular endeavor, and there are no extras. And when Edge Hill's involved, there's a few volunteers. So, friends, know that this man has a track record for quality, and I don't think I've ever done this on this podcast. This is a podcast. This is a Kickstarter I will 100% be backing, and I recommend. So, friends, if you've been jaded, if you are jaded, if you've been burned, I understand. I am saying, however, I'm a fan, and these are my feelings. Anyway, Karl, I apologize, but I did want to say that.
Thank you, sir. That's very, very kind. My background is as a graphic designer, and I was in publishing for kind of 20, 25 years in the past. So, and it's all publishing is just last minute. It is how it is. I make sure that the delivery date that we've got, we start there and work back and make sure that everything is in production. All of those miniatures that you're seeing there have all been, we've got masters of them painted, and we can put into production as soon as the kind of funding goes through. The rule book you've seen now is 95% laid out. I think there's a couple of bits of content that we've got to drop into there and get checked, and I want to kind of get that out to the printers probably kind of in June. So I'm lucky enough that I've got the right kind of skills to be able to kind of understand the production process and how long it takes. And we've been doing it a few years anyway, just with the normal stuff. So, but yeah, I don't disagree with the way that I think Kickstarter should be there to generate, or is intended to generate, the capital that you need to be able to put some of these things into production. And we're a micro business really, and we wouldn't be able to do it if we didn't use this kind of model. And we're eternally grateful for all the people that have supported what we've done over the last 14 years or so, because we're literally standing on the shoulders of giants. We wouldn't been able to do it with a lot of help for some very kind of creative and supportive people and fans as well. So thank you very, very much. I'm only kind of one half of the equation. I can put it out there, but I can't do it without the help of everybody else. So
yeah, well, I'm glad you do, because I love this game and I love the models you put out. Friends, if you have not checked out Crooked Dice Miniatures, you need to do that right now. Go check them out, because every single time I go through that catalog, the world's most eclectic catalog of miniatures, I find stuff I didn't know I needed and have to buy instantly. I am actually not allowed to go on this website all that often, because every time I do, I buy stuff. It is the wonderful, oh my God, just so many good things. Karl, thank you again for coming on. It is always a pleasure to have you, kind sir. When does this Kickstarter kick off? Because while this episode will go out about the same time, let's be clear on the exact start time and the exact end time, so folks can find the 7TV skirmish rules on Kickstarter.
So we will go live on 6 p.m. on Sunday, which I believe is the 31st, and it'll run for 14 days. So it'll finish 2 weeks later on the Sunday evening, normally around kind of 8 o'clock. And we'll be doing a early bird thing for the first kind of 24 hours, which will get that free director miniature if people want to jump on and get that. It'll probably go into it as like a paid add-on after that for the people that kind of that miss out, because I realize it's not always possible. But yeah, just a little kind of incentive for you to kind of jump on board if people want to. So yeah, 2 weeks. We don't tend to run them a lot longer than that.
No, exactly. And folks, if you are looking for this, remember it's the number 7 TV. Don't type out SEVEN. It's not that. It is the number 7 TV. And the company you're looking for is Crooked Dice. Karl, I wish you the very best of luck. You've had such a great track record of funding and blowing through your goals that I look forward to seeing that happen again. I look forward to getting this book in my grubby paws, because you have that pesky rule of making sure that you give everyone what you promise. Unfortunately, it means until this book is in my paws, I don't get 7TV 80s. So you knew I was going to say it again. Can't wait. Cannot wait. And you're my hero for putting the 80s on the tabletop, for the record.
Not long to wait. Not long to wait.
Says the guy who just sits at his miniature collection and waits. Anyway, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I have had a lot of people asking about whether or not why I've been painting 7TV models again. Well, spoilers, there's a good reason. I've also had a few requests for some other games, all of which are coming in the next couple of weeks. I have been in contact to a number of game companies. I have had people asking if I'm going to talk about Operation Megatron, or sorry, not Operation Megatron Down Under, the big bolt action event that we've put up this week that is now sold out. Yes, I'm sure we will. And there are lots of other bits and pieces that people have been asking. I am back. It is a new term. It is term 2 in Australia, which is the big report writing term. It's going to be a busy one, but we will have plenty of episodes coming in the near future. I look forward to talking about the games of 7TV I'm playing, especially after I get this rulebook. But I will be playing in the meantime. I've actually been talking with friends. But if you have any feedback about this episode, question for Karl, Of course, you can contact Crooked Dice. If it's a question for me, please go to Cast Dice on Facebook, CASTDICE. If you message the page, you're guaranteed a response by me. Hi, my name is Brad. Just remember, it might take a few hours because I do occasionally sleep. On that note, as our buddy Casey always says, when you are playing the games that we love to play and that we all know and love, I hope that your dice roll hot. I hope your beverages are cold. But more than that, we at Cast Dice hope that you are having fun. Stay safe out there, guys. Good night.